Episode 1 of Beowulf will focus on the question, what makes a good king for the Anglo-Saxon society? In order to answer this question, we will be introduced to multiple characters within this episode. While all of the characters we will meet are of the Danish house and are warrior kings, the very first king is Shield Chieftain. He's the one that founded this house. After Shield dies, his son, Beowulf, takes over as king. We will meet Beowulf at the bottom of the second column. Beowulf is not Beowulf. You will not meet Beowulf again after this episode. Beowulf, in turn, has his own son and calls him Hrothgar. Hrothgar will be a main character in Beowulf. The final character that we meet is not a king at all. Instead, he's a powerful demon named Grendel. Grendel will also be a main character within this epic poem. Every person, specifically men within the Anglo-Saxon community, wanted to be remarkable. A person who is remarkable is worthy of attention, and thus worthy of having an epic poem written after them. The first 3 lines of the epic poem are introducing this concept. They read, "So, the Spear Danes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princesses' heroic campaigns." The fact that these kings had courage and greatness made them remarkable, and thus worthy of having the first episode of Beowulf written about them. Let's take a closer look at the introductory section. Please annotate along with me. The first character we will meet is Shield Chieftain. As we continue reading this stanza, we will find out what makes Shield so remarkable. The poet tells us he was the scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of mead benches, and he rampaged among his foes. This terror of hall troops had come far, so we find out he's also a terror. All of these we can track for traits of a remarkable person, and as I look back at this list, he's a scourge, a wrecker, he rampages, he's a terror. All of these traits are violent traits. So as you can see, I have put a T for tracking, and I have labeled it remarkable because I am tracking traits of a remarkable person. And for Shield, violence, or being violent, is what made him remarkable. This next section will give us a different trait. It reads, "A foundling to start with, he would flourish later on, and his powers waxed, and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coasts beyond the whale road had to yield to him and began to pay tribute. That was one good king." Even though Shield was a foundling, which means he did not have parents of his own, he was able to prove his worth. And in the end, clans over the whale road or the ocean had to yield to him because he was one good king. Thus, we have learned that in the Anglo-Saxon culture, one can prove their worth through violence. So we will put a summary on the side. You can see that I have placed my summary in a different color, in this case green, so I can easily differentiate or tell the difference between my tracking, which is in blue, and my summary, which is in green. In the next stanza, we are going to learn about Shield's son. As we continue, the text states, "Afterwards, a boy child was born to Shield. This boy child is Shield's son." We also learn that he was sent as a comfort by God, according to the text. He knew what they had told, the long times and troubles they'd come through without a leader. The he here is God. If you look back, this pronoun has the antecedent of God. So God knew how difficult the times were before they had a leader. So the Lord of life, here we get another Christian mention, the glorious Almighty, made this man renowned. Shield had fathered a famous son. As you might have noticed, there's a number of references to the Christian religion. God, Lord of life, and glorious Almighty. This is something we will be tracking in the margins. In line 19, we finally learn the name of Shield's son, which is Baal. Now we will learn what makes Baal a remarkable person. In Baal's first section, we learn that he is prudent and that he gave freely while his father lived. The top of the right-hand column tells us why he gave so freely while his father lived. Because after his father dies, Baal knows that he will need steadfast or true companions to stand by him and to hold the line in battle. This behavior was admired and is the path to power among people everywhere. So again, we are learning what makes Baal so remarkable. Baal teaches us that a remarkable man is intelligent and earns the trust of his warriors. In the next stanza, we see the death of Shield. Even though Shield is still strong and still thriving, his men still follow him, his time came, and he crossed over into the Lord's keeping. Once again, we are seeing references to the Christian religion with the Lord. So we will track that in the margins. Because Shield has died, it is now time for his funeral. This stanza will give us plenty of imagery of a warrior's funeral and thus teach us what a warrior or remarkable man should be like according to the Anglo-Saxon culture. The text states, "His warrior band did what he bade them when he laid down the law among the Danes. They shouldered him, or held him up on their shoulders, out to the sea's flood. The chief they revered who had long ruled them. A ring-whirled prow rode in the harbor." This kenning is referring to a boat. The boat rode in the harbor, ice-clad, outbound, a craft for a prince. They stretched their beloved lord in his boat. Even though the word Lord is here, this is not a reference to the Christian religion. You'll notice that the L in this case is a lowercase l. It's referring to the king, to the shield, who rides in his boat. So the men lay their beloved lord, Shield, onto his boat, laid out the mast, amidship the great ring-giver. Remember that ring-giver is a kenning for king. Now we will learn what is on the boat with Shield. He has far-fetched treasures were piled upon him, precious gear. I never heard before of a ship so well furnished with battle tackle, bladed weapons, and coats of mail. These are all the precious gear that the men gave to Shield for his funeral. The massed treasure was loaded on top of him. It would travel far on out into the ocean sway. They decked his body no less bountifully with offerings than those first ones did, who cast him away when he was a child and launched him alone out over the waves. This section is reminding us that originally Shield did not have parents. But now, as he dies, he has plenty of family, the family that he has earned, and now has so much money that he can take some with him to death. Now let's continue here. "And they set a gold standard up high above his head and let him drift to wind and tide, bewailing him and mourning their loss." So again, we learn what makes a remarkable person. People feel sad when they are gone. Now it is time to summarize this section. So we know that we have just read about Shield's funeral. We know that the Christian ideals believed that the Lord had called Shield, or God had called Shield, to heaven. We know that the men placed Shield in a boat with precious gear, his battle tackle, his bladed weapons, and his coat of mail. They send him away into the ocean, and they are sad when he dies. So we can compose this summary or this paraphrase in the margin. Again, I will give it a different color than the other annotations. I have placed my summary here. Feel free to pause the video now to copy my summary, my paraphrase. Please notice that I have labeled it S for summary. This next section tells us that Beowulf, Shield's son, was successful after his father has died. The text states, he was well regarded and ruled the Danes for a long time after his father took leave of his life on earth. And then his heir, the great Halfdane. So very briefly, we're going to get introduced to a new character, which is Halfdane. Halfdane is Beowulf's son. Halfdane has 4 children. He is also referred to as a fighter prince. So again, we learn he has 4 children. One by one they enter the world, so here are his children. This is a list. Haregrar, Hrothgar, and Helga. And then we also learn that he has a daughter, I have heard, who was Onella's queen, a balm in bed to the battle-scarred Swede. So even though this daughter does not have a name, we only learn her relationship to her husband and king. So we learn that she is married to Onella and that she's a balm in bed, which means she's good in bed for her king. Those are the only qualities that we learn about this woman. We don't even get to learn her name. So again, we learn that a woman during this age needed to please her husband and have children. We can track those traits in the margin. So I have placed it down here only because I couldn't fit it in the margin up at the top, but feel free to put it wherever it fits best for you. So we can track that a woman's worth is to please her husband, to have sons, and of course, to get married. The next character that the poet focuses on is Hrothgar, and you'll remember that Hrothgar is Halfdane's son. He was mentioned in the list in the stanza right above this one. Right here. A number of lines down, we'll be introduced to Harrett Hall. This is the name of the mead hall that Hrothgar will build. At the top of the final column, we will be introduced to this powerful demon. He does not have a name yet, but we know that his name is Grendel. Now it is your turn. Read the final stanza and summarize Hrothgar's plan, track Christian ideals throughout, track imagery for Harrett Hall, and summarize what angers Grendel. Keep in mind, Grendel's name will not be used. He is referred to as the powerful demon. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.